So welcome everybody. How many people have seen me and heard me talking today morning? Okay, so everything you have heard today morning is something I will not cover here again. This is about technology, this is about XML, this is about all the really cool things we all really love. And usually, to be honest and fair, way not as much as effort needed to get something going. Okay, my name is Clemens Utschig. I work for the Oracle Corporation as product manager in Redwood Shores. My work is located on the headquarters. And what I'm going to talk about for the next hour is SOA. I mean, SOA is nothing new, and given all the hands that showed up today morning, a lot of you guys already do web services. So what I want to do is walk you a little bit through use cases we have seen with service-oriented architecture, one part being service-oriented sort of integration, enterprise application integration 2.0 on steroids or standards-based, and the other side being real orchestration, gaining value from reuse of services, right? And in the middle, I want to just check with you a couple of best practices, how we kickstart processes, how we kickstart projects. And the other thing, the talk is entirely Oracle free, so this is everything about marketing, right? One thing to mention is, for Oracle, the SOA journey is something that is at the heart and key of importance. We are at the luxury and unluxury position, depending on from which perspective you see it. Not just to have acquired a couple of companies, like PeopleSoft, like Siebel, enterprise applications, and also technology, like BEA, to integrate those guys, right? And the other part to it is fusion applications. How many people know Oracle applications in the room? So that's sort of Oracle's counter to SAP's standard software founder, right? ERP, CRM, whatever. Key is, this is significant revenue for us. Actually, our ERP and our CRM solutions are a third of Oracle's yearly revenue. It's a lot of money for a not that small company like Oracle, right? And we rewrite applications. And we rewrite applications on top of SOA principles. With people underneath, with services, obviously, to enable you guys to be able to drag and drop the things that you need into your process. So that's the reason why I sort of mentioned that why Oracle bets on it. We bet on our own middleware and on SOA as a principle, as an architecture, as a blueprint. We bet $8 billion on every year. So that's sort of a decent amount of money, I think, for a corporation. Yeah, so much for the story, right? Okay, so we cover typical SOA use cases, a couple of the key standards, and I really want you guys to ask, really interrupt me if you have questions. There's hopefully no large Q&A session where you guys have to remember your questions for an hour. So just kind of raise your hand and ask me, right? If you're interested in this or that, or don't agree with me, just raise your hand and say so. We'll talk about 7 steps that guide you towards a successful SOA implementation, guide you around standards, guide you around the idea of what you implement where. The key thing, how many people have read the book from Dave Chappell, Enterprise Service Bus? Yeah. How many people have read anything from Thomas Roll on service design, service principles? Okay. So you will see actually, when he talks obviously free of any implementation. That's not the cool things with it. On the other side, at the end of the day, you will either implement your own infrastructure, or you better buy it because you have plenty of other things to do in building an infrastructure, I suppose. From that perspective, what are the things you implement where, and where can you gain performance, and where can you gain success, and where do you lose performance and fail? So that's one of the key things I want to go through. The Oracle SOA platform is something I totally leave out here. And it will be covered from the point that there is an enterprise service bus and what it's doing, but that's it. So that's definitely no marketing thing. And Q&A. Okay, so this is what we have seen over the last years, right? I wish everything would be as it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We were happily building client-server applications. Oracle had its own development tools, and it was gorgeous. One fat database, client, worked. On the other side, there's this really, really complex thing going on, and it's called merchant acquisition. And it's called growth. Companies do grow, and companies do develop silos, as I talked in the morning, and companies do develop the same application 15 times for 15 different departments. having access here, or MySQL database there, some Oracle database, maybe or not, right? So really increasing complexity from the infrastructure. The other part of the game is how many people in the room can measure in their software processes end-to-end today. Measure in time and apply KPIs. Hands up. 1, 2, 2 out of, yeah, a lot. And that's one of the big things, right? And now we talk about SOA, we talk about service-oriented architecture, we talk about distributed, highly available, and heterogeneous environments and services that are hopefully assembled to provide you more value and new value. Okay, the application model is apparently evolving. How many people use things like Spring in the room? Dependency injection. How many people use Spring VM? Actually, dependency injection remoted by OSGI. Beautiful thing, right? Services. You expose services in OSGI. Usually expose sort of some sort of services at least. On the other side of the world, right, is this highly distributed solution where you want to have processes, where you want the business to be able to design their processes, assemble services together, bits and pieces, to create value. And obviously, have these guys being highly interoperable. You don't want to bother with like, it's not supporting standards, it's proprietary and whatnot else, right? Key here is not just having and gaining value from services that we assemble together and not hardwire them, but loosely co-wire them. And on the other side, the rich user experience, right? An insight into the process end to end. I want to walk you through 2 use cases that are, at least from our point of view, the 2 extremes. One part is, came out of an acquisition of Oracle Retech. We integrated Retech with Oracle Financials. So we talk about high performance, we talk about record, we talk about near real time, and we talk about how to get data shuffled from A to B. So guess what's there? First of all, we are fortunately out of the ideas and centuries of database links. We want to loosely global services, right? If I wouldn't work for Oracle, Oracle has grown out of the database company, right? We started off with a database. First of all, if I want to connect databases in a service way, we offer adapters that make them standard stretching, right? Expose service definitions, rather than exposing some sort of other fancy units. However, so the first key is expose them through adapters. Make APIs, make services available from native sources standard phase. Standard phase exposed through Whistle. How many people use people in the room? Well, I guess you're all familiar with the famous thing called partner link. A partner link likes to see a Whistle. A partner link seldomly likes to see a result set. So, very simple things, right? Literally a receive, a transform, an invoke, and of course high performance, high volume, some sort of error handling. So that's sort of the lower boundary of what we see on the integration space. People sort of using people, using maybe, to do fat scale integration, right? High performance stuff. But this is not what we talk about when we talk about complex orchestration, reusability of value of services, generation of value. What we talk about there is the other part. Something like that. DSL provisioning. Provisioning that spans different companies. Everybody who has ever worked with a telecom company or a cable provider, might it be quadruple or triple or whatsoever, usually you have BSS and you have OSS. BSS guys are the business service guys and the OSS are really the operating guys, right? If you want to go on provision, you have to talk to both of them, obviously, right? And the key here was, I worked with Bell.com and I worked with Cable Germany and many other large-scale customers that did exactly that. Big pain on today, you order. If it's a cool company, you order on the internet and then you wonder. And hopefully you'll get an email back and hopefully someone is telling you when they are supposed to somewhat come. Okay? Cable Germany had exactly that. The only sort of unfortunate thing was, somewhere in between, their order got lost. And so the day came by and no one came. And the customer called in and said, like, what is going on, guys? I mean, I don't have my time stolen. Oops. Well, we sort of have to search for your order and we come back to you in 2 days. And this is what I talked about previously, right? about the idea of process insight. I mean, if process insight takes 2 days, then seldomly customers in the 21st century are happy customers. So the key was, how can we provision end-to-end, literally from the call to the scheduled appointment where the guy goes out and says, on itself, I'm done, and process is finished, trackable, and monitorable, right? Assessing services and using services from all around. If you ever have seen an OSS device, and when we talk about fancy gimmicks like routers, they seldomly speak XML. Not really. I mean, the latest stuff of Cisco does, but before that, it's usually TCP packets that fly around, right? One thing. The other part being legacy applications. Building in the telco is ndocs, is converges, is everything but XML or web services. So what I want to tell you with that is the key cannot be because integration and SOA is driven so much out of the WS space that everything has to be a web service. How would you ever want to create high performance with SOAP serialization and deserialization? Everybody in the room who has ever worked with DOM knows that this is not really like the super coolest thing for performance. I mean, it's the best thing that you can have for if you have hardware from Dell, because you probably call them at some point to ask for more RAM. On the other side, that's obviously not what you want. Right. So, 2 things. On the one hand, you have very high performance, very low complexity, which is sort of the abuse of people. And on the other side of the world, you have real orchestration of services. This is where people is at home. Right? Where you orchestrate and have process instead. So, key SOA standards, obviously, and first of all, how do I enable stuff? The easiest way is I use some sort of fancy gimmick tool. From Axis, if I have a couple of modules, run Java to Whistle, and guess what falls out? A Whistle. Great. And a little bit of Substack. That's one part. Obviously, a very valid part, right? If my whole world is web service based, and this is what Amazon does, for example, for EC2. For the guys who said who just came out of the EC2 talk, right? Web service is one story. On the other side, there are things that you simply can't enable. Everything like a 6 host or Tuxedo will really hardly talk to you in web services. So the next step to that is to have something that enables you to speak in standard fashion. And given that it's a developer conference, the key is to understand that this is really standard. This is J2CA. This should be J2CA because it's the only thing that provides in the Java world and the J2E world really transactional cohesion. And on the other side, exposes itself pretty nicely in form of records. Records are very often nice to use structures in XML. Set of records makes a collection, perfect, right? The next step is, now that I've exposed everything, a year passed by, I've exposed everything in my company. The only problem with that is everybody can find it because obviously we've done our homework with governance. And so it's everything in the public service registry where I can go with my next best development tool, dig into the UDI and find all my services. It's great, perfect. On the other side, if I find the endpoint, I can invoke it. And that's not so great. Key is to plug something in front of it. However, how many people have developed their own security solutions or handcrafted security code in their applications? Come on, guys. Of course, there are nice things with aspect-oriented and whatnot else, and Summer, JAS, and whatnot else, right? On the other side, JAS won't fly with web services, won't fly with any sort of non-Java definition, right? So think about standards like WS policy. The key is, and the last thing you want, because your service enables something, to hack the code and put some security layer into it, right? Key idea has to be plug something on top, preferably a ground plug. Say, I want to secure you. And I remember when I moved to the States, I come from Austria, and you know, pretty open ideas around what you can do, what you should not do, and like there's no central key that would store all the information. Well, in the States, this is really different. In the States, you have your social security number, and this is the holy grail. With your social security number, you can find everything. Literally, if I ever went to jail, my social security, you name it, it's there. So the first customers that started doing highly critical stuff have ended up with the social security number. If, as an administrator, I can drill down into the social security number of the people process, because we have process insight now, it's the last thing you want. I mean, this is a security breach first class. You have to think about these things, right? And think about it in a way of being able to apply federated identities, right? What about security, after all? What about encryption, partial encryption of full scale? You seldomly get an insurance provider to open up its API to the outside world without any sort of security and without any sort of encryption. It's not going to apply. So the next step, and this is actually the whole promise of SOA, or a big part of technical SOA, is to be more adaptable, right? To orchestrate services, to see them, to be able to drill into them. And here the one and only standard that is out there that I think is truly reasonable is BPEL. And we're talking about BPEL when we talk about a very integration-centric integration. When we talk about a very human-centric integration, we talk about standards like XPDL. Right? So this is something, and a lot of misconception and a lot of misarchitecture was done around that. Right? The one part being integration-centric, integrate and orchestrate services together, the other part being human-centric. And everybody who has seen a business process also, and a business analyst, models go to spec. If it's not going to work, something is going back. Everybody who has worked with people in the room, and I remember quite a lot of guys having their hands on. Can you show me how you implement in BPEL nested go-tos? It's not going to work. I mean, of course, you can tweak it. You can write a gazillion of while loops, but then you lose everything that you gain insight into the process because suddenly you have these large-scale while loops, and there's no way of tracking what really happened. Right? So, sort of the two ways to it. Next step is, obviously, we want to have fancy user interfaces, right? And I think, how many people were in the Ajax talk? I mean, key is fancy, key is rich experience, and key is not client server, right? So standards-based again, and JSR 168, WS remote portlets. Cool standards to expose and to use for that. Last but not least, this is actually who pays you. This is the guided orders. It says, you know what? I'm just sick of waiting 8 months to get something going. I'm losing customers because we're not able to release some new feature. And a large-scale customer in Turkey had exactly that requirement, telco. How many people in the room, I don't know if it's working in India and it's just starting to really work very cool in Europe, have, when you call someone, usually have this nasty ringtone, right? But you can also have cool music. And a lot of kids, and these guys are really the future market of telco, love that thing. And so, Turkish telecom provider came to us and said, you know what? Our CIO said, we just lost a bunch of real cool customers because the next competitor was 1 month earlier than we were with releasing that. They had go-to-market cycles from a year. A year for telco is a century. Optimize and monitor. And key things here are, get insight, use business activity monitoring, use these things. And these are all standards-based, right? This is all ideas to, at the end of the day, bubble information up and be able to look into your process, reassign stuff, do something with it, aggregate information. Because seldomly a business user will show a happy face if you show him, here's your process. Unfortunately, it's XML. Not really what business users truly like to see. Well, how do we do the magic and how does every other integration platform do the magic? We use standards. And in this case, one of the key standards, and even if you build it yourself, to be used is VSIP. If you want to connect to foreign data sources by their native protocol, but use a standard interface, Reusable, right? VSIP is the by far best of choice. You say no. At least it looks like. No? No. Yeah, you. Yeah, at least it looks like. Okay. Everybody looks like. No. It's like in the good days in the university. No. Okay, so the deal here is, how can I enable all these things, right? We talk about JCL, others, and whatnot else. How can I enable them to be transactional? Because the last thing I want is if I require transactionality, and I have this big fight with Thomas Earl on the life and the idea about XA and being XA a good thing and an SOA. Because XA, two-phase commit transactions, and then we talk about loosely coupling. Sort of like, not really fitting. On the other side, If you meet your first customer that tells you, guys, I don't care what you implement. If you lose one record, I put you on the first page of Financial Times, then it's really something to consider. And so did it happen to me. So the other thing is, how many people use that stuff? How many people use synchronous interactions in the room? No matter if it be in Java or web service based or whatnot. Hands up. Okay, so we said at some point we want to loosely couple and we want to scale. And for everybody who went to the EC2 talk, scaling is something that you better leave to an engine rather than trying to do it yourself. And you yourself being the service consumer. Every synchronous interaction, you as the service consumer dictate your thread into the engine, into any sort of service, right? There's a synchronous blocking call. What if you would just say, you know what, tell me when you are finally done. Here's my request. You guarantee me that this request arrived by an acknowledgement, and someone you say, you know what, I'm done, and here's the data. And this is easiest done by WS Everything. WS Everything provides you with the capability. You send out, and you send a request, you send out, you know, here's the information where you can call me back. Here, what service, what port type, what operation. And also, here's a unique identifier, a message ID. This is how I can correlate the stuff back. Because obviously, with a single thread, this is a no-brainer. With more than one thread, it's either magic or something reliable like 890. So, key thing here is use and begin to use, especially when you guys use Axis or whatnot. Axis has capabilities without ends to use WS addressing, right? Use rather than synchronous call, use an asynchronous call. How many people use people in the room actively? How many people of you guys use Oracle people or active people? Active people. Okay. What does active people do when you have an asynchronous endpoint and you call it? Asynchronous endpoint. This. It sends out WS Everything headers. Right? Because the service offers these things. Next best question, okay, but what if I can't do anything like that, right? I mean, it's not a web service. Not everything might fit WS Everything. Totally fair thing. Think about things like correlations, correlation set, a finite amount of data that is unique, a primary key. It doesn't matter, right? But try, when you develop services, to provide an asynchronous interface to that. Well, next step, WS security. WS star, WS trust, and whatnot else. The key here is how easy it is today to federate identities, right? If I go shopping with Amazon, and I go shopping with Amazon and Amazon doesn't have the book, and I get routed to a partner that finally has that book, what does Amazon? Obviously, they have to make sure that they bubble my identity all the way through, because at the end of the day, when I click submit, I sign an order. I sign a definite valid agreement, which is identity based, right? So key standards here, SAML, really nasty to program with if you do it by hand. There are tons and tons of APIs out there that can do it for you. Okay, people and process orchestration, sort of the heart to the whole story. And this is what, and many companies, and also I would say in general, kick-started SOA. And true SOA. One part was obviously the development in the open source community around web service stacks. The other part was that. Just because it was really long put efforts into getting finally one thing done, getting this standard out and getting an easy to use orchestration out the door. So a flow-based language is something that unfortunately, and I really think unfortunately, can be very easily abused. And the more you provide as vendor, as Oracle, Microsoft, and BAs and whatnot, adds power into the platform, the more a macro language like BPEL gets misused as an orchestration, as a microprogramming language. People start doing all sorts of fancy things there they should never do, and then they file bugs. Yeah. So the key here is, it's an orchestration language. Bear this in mind. This is not Java. Although it might look like a lot of cool things, or like Ruby when you easily assemble bits and pieces together, it's an orchestration language. There are no grades today. Anybody? Like, how many people did SOA project? How did you start?
Start with the set of services we already have, what already existing. We evaluate them, rationalize those, to understand what's out there. There's a parallel activity for drawing out the breaking down the process and coming up with a portfolio of services, a list of services, essentially. Maybe I picked up the word there, but we just created breaks down the business process.
So you went top down, or did you went bottom up?
It was both ways.
Okay.
One was to identify what's already there, so that we can show the value of services. And then the other way was to break down a simple business process and show how the two correlate, and then
okay. Cool. Okay. First thing is services. Build up a portfolio of services. No matter how you discover them, and I will talk later about the approaches. You said two of them, there's a third one. What you can do to find those guys, right? On the other side, the key here is, and it doesn't matter if it's Java, if it or anything else, right? Expose them in a way that they are reusable. And reusable means two things. Number one is something that your consumers will understand, especially public services. Things that are really reused high up in the chain. A little connector service, right, that is used by all the applications that all understand the same language has not to be interoperable in the sense of WSI. If it's a business service, something that really provides value to the corporation, to the company, right, that you eventually might expose, like for an order, someone can finally order the web service at your company, WSI is a big deal, because otherwise the Microsoft client stack will tell you this here. Other thing, right, whenever you can design contract first. This is what we used to do in Java, this is nothing new, right? But go interface first. Because very often, people that come out of the Java world and out of the core programming world tend to expose very fine granular things. Get this, update that, delete this, create that, right? Rather than thinking on a more coarse-grained level. And given the semantics of how this looks like, the idea of messages, the idea of parts, I personally feel that it's easier to design contract first. Because it just keeps you at a certain level, rather than having to bother with what fields or whatnot else, right? Other thing is, how many people in the room have heard of a concept called compensation? So the idea here is, we talk about loose coupling, right? We talk about things that might just not work. And I just said, we talked a little bit about transactions. On the other side, if you can, why just not implement when you create a service from scratch anyway? Is it that boring? When you implement it anyway from scratch, implement an undo function. And an undo function is a logical undo. It's not delete the record again, or very seldomly. Today in the world of SOX, in the world of compliance, usually people don't like to see records just being gone. If the record was created as part of a process, invalidate it, right? The key is see if you can implement a logical undo function. And these functions become very handy when you use BPEL, because BPEL has this idea of compensation. If a block fails, I can go and compensate. If several blocks fail, I can go and compensate all the way up, right? So if you develop from scratch, think about this. And this is something that is very hard to implement afterwards, when you're at the level of orchestration, rather than when you create and design your services, right? Next step, asynchronous. Wherever you can, design asynchronous.
Question?
Sure.
Previous one. So does people per se, so that's this compensate hook, if you will, right? But does people per se give you any help in non-idempotent operations?
Non-idempotent operations.
Yes.
So things that you can't call a second time.
Right.
Yeah, sure it does. I mean, one part is the idempotency of the service, right? And how the engine sort of reacts to that. And at what point is it's sort of being able to do that again. The other part is if you have really a non-idempotent service, right? And this you can't have any sort of correlated piece that you could undo. then you're at the point of two-phase commit, right? If you have to guarantee integrity. The one thing you can always do is sort of to shape that into a larger service and have that being the transaction boundary, rather than having fine-grained transaction control in the process. Because at that point, again, we sort of move back from people as a macro language to people as a programming language. Literally, user transactions start and you begin and commit or roll back. So try to delegate that into the service. Might be then it's a compound service that encapsulates those things, but what it's offering you is a clean interface that is non-transactional or not two-phase commit done.
Right.
Okay?
Why do you stress on asynchronous interactions?
Scaling. Scaling. If you have hundreds and hundreds of concurrent users and thousands of concurrent users, with a good chance that they might grow, and they might grow based on peaks. You can either buy the whole stack and make your infrastructure as large as the largest possible amount of users, and then at some point you will run into system threats and JVM threats, because think of it that way, right? Why have we invented queues years and years back? Exactly for that. Scaling is something that infrastructure should do, and not the user that uses the infrastructure. That's why. Answer?
Yeah, but it's not always that you. It depends on what kind of process you are using. If you are strictly a business process driven by a set of back office users or a set of users where the volumes are not big, and it's more interactive versus volume. So if I do step 1 and then I do step 2 and step 3, so on and so forth. So depending on the time factor that comes into play with a business process, differs whether you need asynchronous or not. We haven't seen a big need for asynchronous.
Okay, fair enough. And I pick one word of what you said out, very much dependent on the use case, and you're right. If I have a user that is sort of guided through the process, and I have two sorts of ideas what I could do. Number one is, he follows the traditional model, and the traditional model is click, repeat, response. The other part is an asynchronous task-oriented idea of the world, right? A work basket. At that point, we're asynchronous. And I agree, if you have the force from the customer that it has to be synchronous, okay, there's not much you can do because at the end of the day, he's probably the guy who pays you. On the other side, if you talk about high performance, I can only recommend you. And I've seen many, many consultants from way different companies implementing high performance solutions that just cracked. Because if you force threads into the engine, into whatever infrastructure you do, you're in Java at the end of the day, right? At least on the Oracle side, you're in Java. What happens if you have gazillions of threads next to each other? Congestion and total dead time garbage collected. So that's the reason why leave the engine do the work.
Isn't it more prevalent in B2B scenario?
Is it?
Asynchronous communication that you're talking is more prevalent in B2B scenario when I'm invoking services.
Correct.
And I can wait for
Correct.
that message to come back. But I still try to, this question is still very valid because we always see synchronous only, like it's a request response protocol most of the time. And I want it very fast, maybe you're saying, then how does company tackles when we have thousands of users?
Yes.
And you're saying threads, so many threads respond, but still that is going to the scenario, right?
I agree, and that's the reason why I said that, especially when you come out of the UI world and out of an application world where you click and you want a response, right? Suddenly asynchronous, except when you are in Ajax world. Because Ajax is asynchronously too, right?
Yeah, but this is...
So that's one part of it. However, if you're forced into synchronicity, and make sure that only the pieces that are truly needed for synchronicity are synchronous. You can design processes in BPEL, one of the very cool features of BPEL, I believe, where one part is synchronous and the other part is asynchronous. If I need a response, and even if it's just yes acknowledged, the application cannot go afterwards and query what's the next thing, right? It will get the immediate response. Yes, we have kicked the order off. Yes, it happened. But that's it. That might be just good enough.
No, is there intelligence sitting in your BPEL oracles, right? Where you can decide asynchronous, synchronous, or...
No, really. Unfortunately, BPEL standards allows you to do both. It's your choice. The only thing that we offer is a, I think, 300-page best practice guide on how to design highly scalable processes. And guess what? It's not even a book that you have to buy. It's free. Okay, enterprise service bus, my favorite word. Because it was just like so much what most people said SOA is truly about. Which is to the extent that I disagree with that. Key things, right? You have all those services. We talk about your Java classes that are exposed, we talk about web services, everything else. They usually speak different formats. So the last thing you want to have is your people process, orchestrating all those services, and the only thing that you truly do in your people process is transformations. And then you change one format, and what do you have to do? You have to change every consumer. Loosely coupling? Well, sort of, not really. Right? So the key is enterprise service bus as a pattern, not as a product, as a pattern, to transform into a common object model, standard-based object model. We have customers using Rosetta.net. Pick and choose your favorite standard model and use that throughout the enterprise. OA is gazillion of things there. Other part, is it really great to have a service being named whatever, com.oracle.people.something x, if it's offering me customer functionality and it's hopefully my customer service? Virtualize. Virtualize their location, virtualize their endpoint, virtualize their names. And if you're with legacy, legacy is my favorite in this case. If you ever try to access a mainframe, when you get the data model up, and the data model is C__01 as something, package, whatever, that's the last thing the most users that never work with a mainframe will be able to correlate to meaningful what it offers to me. Right? UDDI registry. Two things. How many people use UDDI or kind of are familiar with what UDDI is? Can you just keep your hands up? How many people would use that UDDI at design time? No one? One? Okay. Good. So one part is, it's a repository, right? Cool thing at design time, obviously, because it's standards-based and people can find your services. The other part is, you can use it to federate. You can bind dynamically. Because the biggest pain today is, I call a service and I usually have to know the semantic. The semantic of the service and the transport. Transport plus location. What if I could just get that dynamically, right? The technology or the endpoint, I don't care. I will get it from some sort of central place, right? That's something you can do with the UDDI. Next step. Well, this is where we gain value. One part being people, and I've talked heavily about people. The other part is, SOA is also human. Big part, right? I mean, one part might be people that say, you know what, we have workflow and we want to go standards-based, how many people? Workflow is a lot with approval, a lot of exceptional, and all these things, right? Human. Of course, I can build my application, but I could just see, and that's a perfect example for asynchronous. A human is an asynchronous service. I send him a notification, and at some point, he hopefully acts on it. How many emails you get every day, and how many emails you reply in, whatever, milliseconds? If it's not your out-of-office reply. The other part to the game is, we talked about this language character, right, in the language aspect. And one big part of it is, I come from Java world myself. Writing business logic in Java is something normal, right? That's the reason why it's a programming language. On the other side, I want to be able to reuse decisions, reuse rules, and potentially have a business user being able to create business rules. That's the reason why they name business rules. And the problem here is, and the challenge, given that people are so powerful, you can do all sorts of interesting things, for, while loops, whatnot else, right? Everything you need to do, rule-based and rule evaluation. On the other side, how many business users you find that like to decompile a Java class, change a rule in the Java class, compile it again? None. What cool if a business user can change the rule in a business-friendly, domain-specific language, right? So really externalize those business rules. Decisions on thresholds, decisions on how do I get to that point, right? And the only thing your processes act on are outcomes. You feed facts in, you get results back, outcomes. and you evaluate an outcome rather than a decision tree inside of people. Sure, you can do that, but this is never going to perform. No matter who implements a BPEL engine, because a decision tree and Jazz is just way faster, right?
Sorry,
sure.
Just repeat the point.
So if you go and implement a decision tree in Java, I bet if I use any arbitrary rules engine, my decision will be evaluated faster than yours. Because a decision tree in Jazz, that is sort of the common idea to how you build rules engines today, really on a knowledge network, an expert system to a big extent, right? Rather than Java code. Yeah.
So people has the decision.
People can use a service, and if fortunately behind that service is iLog or Oracle Rules Engine or any other arbitrary rules engine, you will gain performance. And you will also be able that your business users can change those rules.
How do you get the difference between decision engine and rules engine? What are
Same thing.
Okay.
One thing is an abstracted interface, a decision service, and the other part is an implementation to that, a rules engine, commonly. Okay? Hooray, expose services, right? And expose it in whatever else you want. Expose them standards based. The good thing is, BPEL itself is a service. Every process is a service. You can make use of that. Although most integration-centric ideas come up the idea something is starting it and not someone is starting it. Expose those services, right? Show your user what he's doing. Guide him through that process. Standards, they're all there. Just use them. The big thing, and this is again, this little bubble, is where the guys that pay all of us come into the game. We seldomly do integration and BPEL and SOA and whatnot else for the sake of having IT people writing XML code. But rather for business that wants to gain value, that wants to have KPIs, that wants to have real-time dashboards. I want to see my process, I want to be able to aggregate on data. The key here is surface events. You have a whole infrastructure now, whatever you use, surface events into an engine that can do complex event processing. You're able to predict finally. How cool is that? You can predict when your next spike is going to happen. You can evaluate against fraud. Today, if I look what our customers are doing, SOA or not, the biggest pain I hear from everybody that comes from financial services or from an insurance is fraud. And the algorithms to get to find fraud, it's just nasty. You write thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code for the very simple thing of evaluating a pattern of data. Surface data into complex event processing. Standards based. Continuous field language is there, you guys just have to use it. Policy-oriented security, we talked over and over about that, so I don't repeat it much. And last but not least, scale. And this is where we come back to the asynchronous world, right? The more you're asynchronous, the more scale you can achieve, because you leave it to guys that build infrastructures every other day. And even more, if you look at large-scale grid implementations, EC2 is a perfect example, by the way. When you ask EC2 to provision, EC2 will say, yes, we acknowledged it, and will feed you back at some point, yes, I'm done. Right? Script-based. Otherwise, this thing can't scale. Large XML documents. Yeah, that's a big favorite. We are so much in the world of SOA and Whistle and whatnot else, and usually, for all the guys who program Java, we go and expose a customer object. Whatever, get customer, right? My customer has unfortunately addresses and he has whatever else not. SOA world means XML, means DOM. Large DOM, not good DOM. You expose what you need, right? There's no point in shuffling megabytes of unnecessary data into a service if it needs a primary key and can find the rest in itself. How many people have heard about SDO in the room? So anybody willing or wants to tell me what SDO can do for me in this case? Maybe you just really get through this.
It's like a service component architecture. So you have a service data object. So any component is exposed by an interface, and we have service objects as the message. So input and output, and so we define in terms of service objects. So
anything more? Maybe the key thing?
Change something.
Okay. Anything more? Again, what?
Cache.
Okay, anything more? Filter criteria. I can tell the service, my data access service, these are the 5 fields I want to have back. I don't get the whole chunk if I don't want the whole chunk. And if I send an update, I send my change summary, which is a delta. The key is, finally, the industry has recognized it's not cool to send large-scale documents for nothing. SEO is beautiful because it has all that infrastructure, right?
It gives you a projection view.
Yeah. And you can ask all sorts of interesting things to that piece, right? The key here is, get what you need rather than get everything and filter on the people side. Something we finally learned from the database, you usually not do select star, you do select what you need. Okay, one more thing, batch API, that's also an all-time favorite, right? I mean, SOA is so much about like operations, granularity and everything. Although if you go and change a batch-oriented operation, you seldomly convince batch guys on the mainframe that real-time operations are a totally great thing. Batch operations are there and will be there. The question is, do I really want to expose a service where I can send a collection of gazillions of documents, or isn't there any other way? For example, using ELT and exposing that as service. If I have to transform batch, why shouldn't I do it where it's supposed to be? I use SDOs to transform on the server and on the client too, right? The key is make it part rather than rebuilding it. Okay, so much for that. BPM and ESB, the difference. Something I get asked very often, and it's really, the whole presentation is centered around my experience that I gained from customers, right? People ask me over and over, listen, you guys have a BPEL engine, you guys have an ESB, and actually BPEL is horribly fast, ESB is faster than that. Where do you implement what? Right? What is BPM? What is the sake of BPM, BPEL? What's the sake of ESB? And every other vendor has the same problem. So the question is, where do I implement what? If I shuffle data from A to B, non-orchestrated, right? Adapters, transformation and content-based routing, is it necessary to have a stateful engine? No, right? And this is where you keep sort of down here or up here, right? You mediate information, you mediate, you have error handling, you have adapters, right? Adapters could be just so plain whatsoever, right? On the other side, the more you move towards state, you move towards complexity, the more you find yourself back in the business process management world. Because the closer, obviously, your integration relates to the business process. My order to cash in my company, right? Seldomly, an order that is synchronized between two systems has much to do with order to cash. A process that orchestrates services from 7 different systems to finally generate revenue or book revenue is pretty close to order to cash, right? And the more here you're in state, asynchronous interactions, human that participate. You need state. This is not stateless anymore. So summary, the 7 steps we talked about, right, will at least enable you or help you to get to something that you can easily go and evolve. And by no means, the idea is to push you in to do everything in one shot, do big bang. Use what you use today. There are methodologies out there. There's the rational unified process, there's extreme programming, there's sprints and Scrum and whatnot else, right? Incrementally, but follow those steps in every cycle. It will help. Okay, I decided to also show you a little bit. That's the only time when I show you Oracle stuff today. So here's the key, or here's the idea. I have a shopping portal, and obviously we said what you do with an ESB, you usually try to virtualize, right? From some sort of interesting BPEL URL, you virtualize the entry format that an application can understand, and you also virtualize the endpoint of it, right? Second thing, you do orchestration, and here we see 5 to 15 minutes, state, asynchronous loose interactions, humans, people, BPM, as good as it gets, right? We have also things like, do I have to ask for approval? Very simple business rule, right? Easily implementable in people, it's one switch. On the other side, if I want to change it from outside, yeah. I want to have a service where I can change it. Same thing, right? I want to transparently add new stuff. Easiest done because of virtualization. My consumers will never see it. So many people that use web services today use web services and RPC protocol that is fixed and bound, right? Because you have a proxy to that, then you generate in that proxy. Usually there is some sort of endpoint URL, finding what else. Now your service provider changes. And you have to find back every service consumer that has this proxy. Really nice thing. And last but not least, we talked about this idea of WAN, right? Surface events into an event engine, be able to aggregate in an event engine. So I want to show you two things. One part is design, right? The key here is to be able to design swiftly. I don't want people to write Java code again. I want to shade logic away from them. I want to shade complexity away. The idea here is as much as you can, right? And that's the beauty with people. People supports XFile, supports drilling into things very sort of humanly. And obviously I can do all sorts of interesting things, such as not opening an XSL transformation. And also, the only thing that people truly knows about, and that's the key with people. If you think about the web service that you expose, what is it what it usually offers me? What is in my vista? I have types. I have port types. They are totally independent of any sort of technology. And I have a binding section, or more of them, and services sections. This is technology, right? So I have semantics and transport, more or less. The only thing that people truly needs is the abstract part. The only thing that people operates on here is a partner link that exposes roles and an operation that I choose, right? That's it. Port type operation. Beauty, because it actually shades you away from thinking, even starting to think about technology. The only sort of unfortunate thing is that it's XML anyway. So looking into the runtime, right, and this is what I talked about. I want to see my process. I want to be able to see what is wrong. That looks beautiful, even for a business user. However, I don't know how that really looks beautiful to a business user. Key here is something went wrong in that process, right? I want to see it. I want to see it real time. That's the whole idea why we do people, why we do orchestration. Business users and many other users are sick of trying to grab through thousands and thousands of log files to just find out why this one thing was incorrect. You want to have visibility. That's why some of you guys use people, I guess. The other part to it is I want to be able to control all these things. I want to be able to version, right? I want to be able to manage end to end. The only thing that I don't show you is bandwidth. Think of it that way. Every activity can surface events. We do all these things, right? This is for the orchestrated pieces where I use and call a service and it can send an event, and even if it's just an ID, yes, I got it. And you can obviously aggregate on all of these things. So here's what we learned. Oops. I thought actually there were a couple of more slides, but unfortunately they are not. Okay, but they're not there. When you design SOA, when you move towards SOA, think of the idea of how much value you can generate from reusable services rather than building a service that is good for one integration, one API, right? It's the same thing that we are so much used to do when we develop Java code. Usually we create interfaces in the hope that others would reuse them. They provide a little bit more functionality than we would use, right? On the other side, think about asynchronous stuff. Think about virtualization. Think about a common data model. And last but not least, think about who is paying you to do all these things. It's the business. Thank you.